Welcome to this episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I'm Paula Eddie Wilcox, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest for the second time, where we're looking at their take on the game and leadership aspect of the podcast. Who knows what we might find out, because we all look at this differently, and it's always so interesting to see what the guests have in store for me when I turn up, because we never plan this in advance. So I hope you're as excited as me. Let's get into it, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to this episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. And I'm joined again today by Emma Dechoux, who is just fantastic and an expert in all things leadership and development, and heads up Inspired Learning. Lovely to have you back, Emma. Welcome.
Good to be back. Thanks, Paula.
Excellent. Well, today we're going to look at your take on game and leadership. But there's a question hanging over from our last episode together where I just wanted to make sure I pick up on this, because I know if people are listening, they'll be like, well, she never answered the question. Well, we were talking about too many great things, and often there's too much to fit into one episode. So delighted to have you back again and be able to touch on that. And that was, who's been your inspiration in your leadership over the years?
Well, yes, thank you for bringing that back. I think, too many people to mention. But I think when I think about, in particular, in terms of leadership, and something that I say to, a lot of leaders that I develop now is, you've got to look back at your previous managers. Yeah, so there's been lots of people that have inspired me in terms of, people that we know about in the public eye but the leaders that you're led by. So, so if we just briefly mention some people in the public eye, like Anita Roddick was probably one of my first inspirations, the founder of The Body Shop, and just her story of how she set it all up and what she did and the whole ethics that she created around The Body Shop. Absolutely drawn into that. And lots of inspirations to this day that I talk a lot about, like Stephen Covey, Simon Sinek. I love Brené Brown's work, and Karen Brady. I loved reading her book when that came out and things like that. So lots of people in the public domain, but I'd say from a personal level, and actually, this might sound like a strange one, but I also thank the leaders that I had that weren't so great.
Oh, I'm totally with you on that, Emma. Absolutely agree. Because they show you who you don't want to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I say that to people now, actually managers that you have, it's good to have some managers that aren't so good in your career, because you can think, okay, when I'm a manager, I'm not going to do those particular things. So I've definitely learned a lot from those who shall remain nameless. But then the great managers that I've had that I really look up to. And on the whole, when I think about why were they great managers, what kind of traits did they have and what they do, it always comes down to that they listened.
Yeah.
And something I always talk about is that, if we were on Family Fortunes, the game of leadership, Family Fortunes, the top answer of, what makes the best manager or leader would definitely be listening. Because, there's a head of learning and development that I reported into at Phones for You, who, in fact, when I say reported into, I didn't report directly into him. There was two managers between me and him. So, I wasn't one of his direct reports, and I knew how busy he was, and you kind of looked up to him thinking he's the head, he's the head of the department, and, he must be so busy, and et cetera, et cetera. But when he was talking to you, that didn't matter. And he made you feel like, actually, nothing outside of this conversation matters right now. You're the most important person. And everybody in the team said that he made them feel like that. and so to have that and not be distracted by anything else that's around you and show that genuine interest, for me, that's the thing that inspires me, is when leaders give that time and attention to the people in their team. So definitely some heads of learning developments that I've reported into, and other managers along the way as well. But that I would say that's probably the main thing that sticks out.
Yeah. Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. And I love that you touched on the what we don't find inspiring or helpful in our past experience, as well as those that truly inspire us. And we say, I want to emulate that when I become a leader. One day when I grow up and I'm a big leader, that's what I want to be. I love that. Thank you so much, Emma. So now I'm really excited because in your previous episode, you sort of alluded to the fun aspect that you like to bring to, the leadership development that you're sort of going through with others, supporting them in, and the kind of inspiration, hence the name of your company, Inspired Learning. So please tell me, what's your take on Game of Leadership?
Well, I spent a lot of time thinking about this episode in particular, because to especially to narrow it down, and where we've already spent a lot of time in the first one with me, but it is something that I've been passionate about for a long time, is having fun at work, because we spend an awful lot of time at work. And for me, it's about making sure that while we're doing that, we're not spending time at work, and I've never wanted to do this, and I never want anyone in my team to do this, is kind of wish our lives away for Friday. Yeah. And you see all the memes still, and people that, oh yeah, we even call it, Happy Friday. We never say Happy Wednesday or Happy Tuesday, do we?
Exactly.
And so I've never wanted to feel like that, and I never want other people to think that, well, we're just wishing and waiting for Friday. And so actually it's about, getting results and getting the work done, but actually, why can't we have some fun while we're doing it? And so when I thought about, well, because it is such a big thing that I've always done, whether that's in my training or whether I've led teams, I kind of really thought, oh, okay, well, which bits do I mention in the time that we've got together today? And so I probably will talk about it in two parts and two ways of looking at it, because it's the game of leadership in terms of what I do now within Inspired Learning, in my workshops, and how do I bring that fun and energy to learning about being a great leader, but also then some of the things that I did as a leader when I was managing large teams. So probably two ways of looking at it. And being the curious leader that I am, I actually thought, when I thought about the word game and then I thought about fun, I thought, actually, I don't think I've ever looked at the definition of the word game and what it actually means. And so three key things really stood out for me. So I went on to search it on the internet, and I just loved what it said. And I thought, absolutely, that just totally resonates with me in terms of what I do today and what I've done as a leader. And so what it told me was that basically a game is an activity that one engages in for amusement or fun. So I'd already thought about the word fun. And so absolutely, I try and bring those activities to my workshops. So we can engage, we can have some amusement, we can have some fun. And when I've led teams, I've brought that to the team. So that totally resonated with me. The second thing, and how it describes it, is a complete episode or period of play ending in a final result. So again, perfect in terms of, that period of play can be either me in a workshop with leaders in one day, or a program, or when it was in my teams, that period of play could be the next 12 months, for example. But what it is that we're playing this game, but actually there's a final result from it. And It's then when we then look to the following year, when that period of play is up, it's like, well, how can we level up? It's like when you think about a computer game, how do you get to the next level? So absolutely loved it because of that, that second description. And then the last one was eager or willing to do something new or challenging. Again, so absolutely love this because, in my sessions, I want people to be willing. So I want them to be engaged. I want them to have fun on the day, but then walk out of that room being eager and willing to try something new that they've learned that day, that they might find challenging to start with. But actually, it's about persevering with that, knowing it might feel a bit awkward when we start something new, but actually, that's where the magic happens. So, and again, when I've led teams, it's about making sure that they're willing to do something new and actually supporting them through that as well. And through those challenging times, making sure that we're still having fun. And when we talk about challenging times, I think when we go through challenging times, whether it's because of the workplace, whether it's globally, we've been through challenging times the last few years, I think it's even more important to bring the fun element to it, but sometimes that's when it can go out the window.
Yeah. Oh, you're so right, Emma. The L&D budget, the fun element, all of that, personal development, always the first thing to go when budgets are tightened. And it's such a shame because actually in those times of challenge and difficulty, they're the times when people need it most because it helps keep them going through the challenging times.
Yeah.
And yet again, I know you've got more to share, but just so far, those three sort of definitions of game, if you like. I mean, for me, so far, every single person, and we're into quite a number of guests now in the podcast, you've all brought something different to this episode, and not one others looked at the definition of game in its real sense. And I love that because absolutely those three elements totally apply here in that leadership space.
Yeah, absolutely loved it. When I looked at that, I was like, wow, bingo. It's like everything that I have been doing and I do to this day. So it's a good confirmation for me about doing the right thing. And I think we need to get away from this kind of stuffy seriousness in the corporate world, and actually know that that's not what drives results. And when people are working under fear, people are not operating at their best selves. And quite often as leaders, if we are a leader like that our team are working under fear, we're pointing the finger. Oh, this person, this team, they're underperforming and they're not doing this and they're not doing that. But as I often say, when you point the finger, there's three pointing back. So, it's really about taking some reflection to think about, well, how do I do things? And do I bring some fun to the party? Because that is what's going to get you results. And I've seen that happen with the teams that I've led over the years. So just kind of on from that, in terms of that fun element, yes, it's been, inspiration from people that have been, managed by in the past, or managers that I've seen how they manage their teams. But a big thing for me was the fish philosophy. So, it's quite an old book and an old philosophy that a lot of people in the training team will know about, because we used to train it a lot, especially in sales training. So to give people context, if they've not heard of it before, it's about the fish market in Seattle. And if you think about working on a fish market, it's smelly, it can be cold in the winter, it's not a great place to work, you've got to get up early, and on top of that, if you're not selling fish, it's not a great place to be. And so they adopted this philosophy that I have, just from the kind of day that I read this book and came across it, kind of lived and breathed it with my teams. Because it's about, there's four pillars to it, but I would say, in terms of what we're talking about today, it's definitely the last one that resonated with, that I've used the most. So, you know, you've got things like being present with each other, and that comes back to that listening I spoke about before. Making people's day, so make their day is the other one. Choose your attitude. So, you know, come into work and the only person that's going to choose your attitude is you. And the last one, my favourite, is have fun. And so I just really adopted that as a leader and really thought, yeah, this is absolutely what we need to do. And yes, we haven't got fish to throw. And, you know, if you try and replicate exactly what they do, that's not going to work. You've got to find your own fish philosophy and what you bring to it. And so that's been something that for many years I've kind of worked towards with my team. And, you know, there's been things over the years that I've done where I've inherited a team where morale was very low and they weren't having any fun at all. And it was all very serious and, you know, even made me feel going into that there's a feeling, isn't there, that you get when you walk into a room that's dysfunctional and underperforming. And for me, it makes me feel almost like I can't breathe because just the atmosphere in the room isn't great. And so I did a few things with this team when I inherited them, don't get me wrong, but one of the key things that I did and I started was every morning at 9 a.m, we would do some sort of icebreaker and have some fun. And for the first couple of weeks, you know, as a trainer of 17 years, well, at that time, probably, I don't know, maybe 10, something like that, you know, had my own little toolkit of icebreakers and fun games. And so we'd just meet every day at 9 o'clock, and which also straight away eradicated anybody, because we had some issues with lateness because people wanted to be there for the game in the morning. And if the weather was nice, we'd do it outside. If not, we'd take one of the meeting rooms and we'd do some form of game in the morning. And it just set people up for the day. This was a recruitment team at the time who were making 80 calls a day to candidates, not all of them great. And it can be quite demoralizing. And so rather than actually making that fun throughout the day, you know, they were just not in a great place at all. And I can remember one of the team members when we were outside doing something silly with hula hoops, and she's quite introverted, not very confident at the time, and I really worked with her on that. But I can remember her saying, "Oh, there's people looking at us out the window," like really embarrassed. And I said, "Good, you know why? Because they want to be in this team." And like, get the hula hoop and get on with the game, kind of thing. But absolutely grew to love them, and so did the rest of the team. But then it's about ownership. So after a couple of weeks, you know, probably my ideas were running a little bit dry. I did a bit of a rota, and so every day someone else from the team brought their own game and did something. And so it was just, you know, it might have only taken 15 minutes. Now, a lot of managers, a lot of organizations, you know, I know this from working with so many organizations, would probably look at that and go, well, that they should be working at 9 o'clock. You can't be playing a game till, you know, not 20 past. They should be working. What about productivity? But I can guarantee you that setting them up for the day, spending that time, absolutely, productivity did soar. They started to work better together as a team in the office because they were doing team building things every single morning. And also, before I inherited that team, they would come in the morning, maybe some of them late. They'd start to make a brew and porridge and then sit at their desk eating it, talking about what was on TV the night before. Well, they weren't doing any of that then because they were having some fun together as a team. So that's the kind of one of the things, you know, in terms of bringing fun to it. And then when I moved, I mentioned in the last episode last week that when I moved into the role within healthcare and started to build the team of recruiters there, again, I wanted to bring that culture that we had at Phones for You to this other business. And the behaviours in that business were very poor. Lots of people very negative. I remember even saying to my team once, we should have a sign on the door saying, if you don't walk in with a smile on your face, don't bother coming in. You know, kind of one of those things. But they're the kind of things that I'd say to the team, and we'd have, you know, lots of positive quotes up on the walls and loads of really posters. The team would always know where we were up to results wise, and we'd celebrate that. And there were certain incentives that I started to bring into the team at the time where I had no budget as a manager, so I had to be very creative. That creativity comes back, where I had to be very creative on not spending too much money because it all came out of my pocket, but what can I do that's going to have some impact and bring a bit of fun to it. And so, you know, I used to do things like the last day of every month, I would do some research on what awareness days were coming up that month and create some fun days and fun activities. I am a feeder when I'm a leader, I'm not going to lie. A lot of things do involve food.
Love it.
But we'd have, you know, let's say it was a certain day, an awareness day. So we'd bring, you know, we'd get everybody to bring 2 items of food that were to that theme, for example. And so we'd have a huge, because we had a huge team, we'd have a huge buffet, and you know, everyone would love it. I can remember doing a bake-off once, and just, you know, fun things like that. But then also, we used to have, I bought a giant Jenga, so it cost me about £17 off Amazon, just a huge giant Jenga block. And some of the blocks, a lot of the blocks were blank, and some of them would have times written on. Some of them might only say 15 minutes. A few of them were 30 minutes. Even less of them said an hour. And then there was one that said half a day and one that said a full day. And so every time one of the recruiters booked in an interview, because that's what they were targeted on, they'd come and get a block from the Jenga block. And if it had a certain time on it, they could then let me know on what day they wanted to either come in late and those amount of minutes, or finish early for those amount of minutes. So that didn't cost me anything other than the Jenga game. And just that them leaving early. And it was very rare someone got a full day or half a day.
Yeah.
But I loved it. And then just to bring more fun to the game, if you took a block and it all fell down, it was your turn to get the round of brews in for the team. So, you know, like a forfeit kind of thing. And you had to build the block back up again. And so we didn't have that necessarily every day. Because a key thing here with games, and something I really wanted to mention, is you've got to keep it fresh and do different things. There's only so many times, isn't there, Paul, that you can play that game where you put a post-it note on your head and you've got to guess who you are.
You're absolutely right, Emma. You know, that and this is where, you know, you can clearly see your passion and your gift for that creativity and keeping them engaged, because whilst your original intention is to insert fun and get them engaged, if you keep doing the same thing every day, then it becomes boring and bland again, and the fun just goes out of it, and they start resenting showing up for it. You end up back with the people showing up late and so on that you originally started this to help eliminate. And it goes back to that you were saying before around, on the previous episode about changing things around your environment, because actually same input, same result. If you want some different results, you're going to have to start putting some effort in to change things up. And that absolutely includes what you've been talking about today in terms of that keeping it fun and engaging in terms of team building games, or however you choose to introduce that game in its traditional sense into your team as you lead them.
Yeah. And it's more fun to lead a team when for you personally, when you're, having fun with it. And just going back to that fish philosophy, when I started to do these things, because we were in a new building, I mentioned that in the first episode. So the head office was across the road, and then we had all branches across the country. So when we were in this, there was only recruitment in this building, and that was it. All the other functions were across the road, and so we started to do these things. I used to have a players player award, or we called it recruiters recruiter, every month. I'd do certain things with scratch cards and things like that. And I remember coming out of my office one day and seeing somebody that had come across the road, and a couple of people had already asked me that week, can I have a meeting with you? Because I'm hearing about all these things that you're doing with the team, having loads of fun, and just quite interested because my team isn't in the best place, and I'm just really interested in having a meeting with you to see what it is that you're doing. And so on this particular day, someone had travelled to our office and was taking photographs of the things that I'd put up on the wall. And when they walked off, I said to whoever was in my team that was showing them around, I said, what were they doing? Why are they taking photos? And like, well, because they've heard about all the things that we do as a team. So they're taking photos so they can take it back to their office. And I just sat back and thought, wow, I've created my own fish philosophy. I was like, this is it. I've done it. I've got now people coming and seeing what we do and wanting to spend time in our office, in our surroundings. Just the same as, with that fish market in Seattle, you have people in suits that go at lunchtime to watch what they're doing because it gets them motivated to go back to the office. And I thought, I've created my own fish philosophy here. I love it. It's brilliant.
Oh, what a fantastic accolade, and nothing better than it growing legs of its own. And I hope you know what I mean by that, where it does start to absolutely inspire and motivate others because you're showing amazing and creative and unique leadership in that moment, and they want some of that, because they want to start choosing to show up as a leader that's much, much more emulating what you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great compliment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't believe it when they were taking photographs. I was like, brilliant.
How lovely. What a lovely, again, totally different and unique take on the game and the leadership element here. Gosh, Emma, so much. I feel like we could talk all night, but we want to save some of this for our third episode, and I want to say final episode for now. Because I'm sure there'll be a wonderful point in the future where we'd love to come together again on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. I could carry on talking all day. You know me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I just love listening to you and chatting, as you called it before, chewing the fat with you. It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Emma. And we are so lucky because we've got you back for one last episode next week, where we'll be looking at the pivotal moments, and you teased one of them in your first episode. I won't mention it again. Go back and listen if you haven't already. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing that one and the other pivotal moments that got you to being the fabulous leader you clearly are today. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll see you next week.
Look forward to it. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I always think the game episode is one of my favourites because we get a real insight to our guests' take on their ideas of how games and leadership fit together. Every one of them is different, and just when I think there isn't another take that we haven't thought of or covered, one of our guests comes up with something totally different and unique. It's really exciting. Look, now it's your turn. See what you think, see what resonated with you most. And as always, I encourage you to reflect on what you've heard and see what that might mean for your leadership moving forwards. I'm Paula Eddie Wilcox, and this is Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I really look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye for now.